All right, everybody, we're getting started just a minute early today. Louie and I were just talking about some of our fresh greens and holiday materials that we are looking forward to seeing arrive in store very soon. I know everybody's starting to get ready for the holidays, so we're glad that you all can join us for a couple of our final fall classes. And just while we're waiting for people to get logged in, I will tell you, Louie, I'm very excited that I got to join you for this class because I've been hearing about this project for several months. so I'm looking forward to learning about it. Let's see. All right, we're officially at noon. Okay, so a few quick notes for those of you as we're getting logged in. This is kind of a fun finale to our fall classes. Louis has been working for the past few months to design an indoor fern garden, and I've been hearing about it and looking forward to hearing about how he created this. So he's going to be walking us through the process today as to how he created this, and it should be very fun. So this is a unique type of class. I think because we are getting closer to the holidays, we have less people signed up. So that's actually the great news for those of you who are on it, because we should be able to get to most people's questions as opposed to when we usually have to kind of cut the questions off towards the end. Louis, I'm not sure if you're planning to go for the full hour and then take questions after. Is that the case for this class?
Yeah, that works out best for me.
Okay, guys. So when Louis does classes with us, we generally he generally speaks for the full hour, and then we do Q&A following that. So just be aware if you have to leave before we get to the Q&A, we're recording this class, and you can come back for the Q&A, get the recording tomorrow, or please feel free to follow up with me by email. I'm about to open up our chat, and I will send, let's see here. Let me just make sure I'm doing this setting correctly. All right, you guys can chat with me now. So I will send my email out through the chat so that you guys can ask questions, and either during the class, or if you guys can follow up by email with me after the class if you have to leave. Let's see, any other notes? This is kind of fun today since we're a smaller group. For anybody who is unfamiliar with our class format, this is a webinar, so we're not actually able to speak with you all today. You guys can type the questions that you have into that Q&A box. If you have any technical questions, again, send that to me through the chat, and I'll see if I can assist you all. A follow-up email will go out tomorrow with a coupon and our holiday shop. Yes, I will be sending the recording and the coupon, and I will note that our holiday shop officially opens Thursday, so I would encourage everybody to stop by to use that coupon on some holiday stuff before Thanksgiving. So should be a great time to stop by the store. Yeah, I love it. All right, Louis, I think that's enough from me, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you so I can learn from you about this indoor fern garden you've been working on.
Hi, my name is Louis, and I work here at Merrifield at the Fair Oaks location. And I basically, during the winter time, I work in our tropical greenhouse where all of our tropical plants are. And for the last couple of seasons, I pretty much have taken care of all those things. Back in March, I decided to go ahead and try to work on the hardest plant that I believe which is the maidenhair fern, which is this fern right here. So the maidenhair fern, in my opinion, is the hardest plant to grow in the nursery. So I know a lot about the trees, the shrubs, the perennials, the annuals. I know about all the tropical plants. And if you take this plant and try to grow it, it is extremely difficult. So my challenge was going to be to see if I could actually grow one of these ferns. So that's how this whole thing got started. So this is the maidenhair fern. So from there, so this is the end result of my garden. So I think that was something that you already saw. So the background about myself is I started growing houseplants at a very young age. It was really easy for me to decide on what I wanted to do for a living because I've always been very passionate about plants. I started in the nursery business probably close to 30 years ago. And I've been to like 3 or 4 different nurseries that I've worked at. This one being my favorite one, and I've been here for probably about 8 to 9 years. Another thing that I really love is doing designs. I was an artist. I've done some painting back in the day, and I really enjoy painting with plants. So that's my background about designs. And the other thing about me is that I live in an apartment, so I don't have a yard. So this venture actually gave me the opportunity to have a garden indoors. So basically, the maidenhair fern, as I just mentioned to you, is probably the hardest plant to grow. I've always tried to grow it, and basically it's an annual for me. It's one of those plants that basically I could never grow. It would die probably within a week or two. Sometimes I even got to go for a full month. But it's very, very hard to grow. One thing about a maidenhair fern is it has a very, very definite, very defined things to literally get it to grow. So what I did was I decided to make the perfect environment for the maidenhair fern. I did this back in March. So the way that I started this was I cleaned off a shelf in my apartment, and this is the shelf. Cleaned it off and decided to put in a tray. Now, what I did with this tray is I actually filled it up with gravel, with pea gravel, and that was going to be the moisture. So it's going to produce a lot of moisture, and it's going to be constant moisture. So that was one of the things to make sure that I was successful at growing this maidenhair fern. So the second thing is lighting. Most ferns like very bright light, but no direct light on them. So I went out and got a grow light. I installed that. I found out later that these ferns really thrive on about 12 to 14 hours of light to about maybe 8 hours, 9 hours of darkness. It's really important to make sure that they get the darkness aspect of that. So then I started the garden, and this is what it looks like. 4 of those plants are maidenhair ferns. One of them is called a tricolor fern, and then I put in some Irish moss or some Scottish moss, which actually is a perennial from outdoors. So I started out with these ferns, as I just mentioned to you, and I wanted to make sure that they grow. The thing about the plants is that if they're not growing, there's something going on there. If they are growing, that means they're happy. So I just waited and I waited and I waited for this actual maidenhair ferns to grow. And guess what? They did, which I was very, very excited about. So again, I've always worked with these ferns before, really never had a good environment for them. So the first one that I started out with was the silver dollar maidenhair fern. This is probably one of the hardest plants to grow. And this is a picture of it today. The leaves on the side, actually this thing grew so much since March that it actually got too close to the light. So I had to move it away. You can tell by the leaves themselves that they got a little on the burn side. The regular maidenhair fern, I have 2 of those in my garden. And one thing that was really shocking about it was having to transplant these. Most of my ferns are in terracotta pots. I like the idea of them regulating the clay, regulating the soil moisture. When I went to transplant these into terracotta pots, these 2 ferns actually went into a decline. I talked to my manager down in the greenhouse, and she said not to disturb the roots at all, make them feel like they've never been transplanted. And lo and behold, they realized they were transplanted and they started to decline. And then eventually some of the leaves did turn brown and then they started growing again. So I was pretty much relieved about that. And then there's one that is the one that mimics the one that we have that grows hardy in our area. I've actually seen maidenhair ferns growing in the woods around here. And that's this one right here. And by far, this is the easiest one to grow, in my opinion. Even though it's not that easy, it's easier than the other two. So, and then a little background on myself is I do a lot of hiking, and I've always loved ferns. When I go on hikes, I always take different photographs of them. This is an ostrich fern that grows about 3.5 feet. And then this is a Christmas fern. I like ferns that are hairy. These are fiddle things coming out of the ground in the springtime. I took this photograph when I was on one of my hikes. And then here's another one. This is a hay scent fern. So traveling fern that goes all through the woods, and it's a native as well. So I've always been attracted to ferns. So after competing the first part of it, where I've gotten the maidenhair ferns to grow, and I became pretty confident about that, I decided to start making a fern collection. I started with very, very small 4-inch type of containers, and I love to watch them grow. So what I did was I went and got some of these and started a collection of ferns. There was another area in my apartment where I set up pretty much a small scale type of same setup, where I had the grow light, I had the tray, I had the pea gravel. Another thing about getting humidity or getting moisture is to take ferns and take plants and put them very close together because they help each other out. So I started bringing in more ferns and actually putting them in very, very close together. That's one of the advantages of having a lot of small plants, was that they took care of each other to a certain degree. So and what I thought I would do is have a collection of ferns, and then over time change the makeup of the fern garden so that I could pick and choose different ferns to put in there. I also realize now that ferns grow, and some of the ferns that I started with actually outgrew the garden itself. So I had to set up another area for my larger ferns, but we'll go over that in a while. So one of the first things I decided was, after creating this fern garden, is to do some of the landscaping on it, actually make a design. And so one of the things I did was I started making some designs for this garden. And this is the first one. You're looking at it from the bottom of the page and you're looking into it. And what I decided to do on the edges, on the far left and on the far right, is to put in larger ferns. So that actually is a framework. And then taking the middle of the actual garden and making that sort of like my showpiece. The one on the left, it has the 3 S's that are somewhat in a triangle. That is a vista. And what I mean by that is that I put very small ferns in that area that went back all the way to the back of the garden, so that you could actually see into the garden. And then my focal point, which was the silver dollar maidenhair fern, I put that almost smack in the middle. That was my showpiece. That's basically the focal point of the garden. And then over to the right-hand side, I put in some bigger ferns. The yellow fern in the back was a Boston fern, a very small Boston fern that eventually outgrew its space. But that was the other vista on the other side. So I made this makeshift type design and set this thing up. And then later on, I became a little bit more advanced. I did add a cocoa liner to the back, and I'll go into detail about that. I still have on both sides, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are large ferns. And then again, in the middle of that, I put in some of my smaller ones. The 9 is the actual silver dollar fern, and number 6 is the golden fern that we talked about. Number 7 is a butterwort. It is actually not a fern; it's a carnivorous plant. And I'll talk about that eventually. And then I put a lot of the smaller ferns inside, and still maintain that vista on the left-hand side that went back to the creeping moss fern. I did put that up against the cocoa liner so that actually could start climbing up it. On the right side, I have the Pila vine, and that one actually I decided to go ahead and get that one to grow up. And then number 8 is a kangaroo fern, which is a broadleaf fern that basically sends out roots that actually could climb up the cocoa liner. So this is just a little bit more advanced in my design. And then this is where we're at today. I still have the Pala over there. The butterwort has gotten extremely large. The kangaroo fern in the back. I did get a new fern, which I'll talk to you about later, but I still maintain that vista that goes back to the creeping ficus, which I thought was pretty neat. And then I started up using a lot more of the carnivorous plants. But this has been real fun for me. Once the plants get too big, I would take them out and then get some new ones. And this is an ongoing process. And it's fun to change it up over time. So going back into a little bit more detail, here's a picture of it probably a couple months ago. There is a couple of the larger ferns in the back or on the sides, as I mentioned. The focal point is the one right smack in the middle. That one is the silver, the silver dollar fern. That green one that's sitting inside the gravel is a butterwort. Insects land on that, and the actual leaf eats them. I still have the heart's fern, which is the one in front. I have a little story about that, and some of the other ferns. So this is starting to evolve and is starting to become a little bit more, interesting. So then I started to add some more ferns into the garden. And what I'm going to do now is talk about some of the individual ferns that are in the garden. One of them is my yellow Boston fern. This fern started out extremely small, and I did use it in my garden for a couple months. The thing about it is the tips of those branches literally grow, and they continue to grow. This plant can actually get six feet eventually if you took care of it. So this eventually outgrew the garden, so now I have it in another area. A beautiful fern. I love the golden part of that. The mahogany fern is another one. It's more of a shape, a vase shape. This one too literally got too big for the garden, and so I had to take it out. I love the idea of the vase shape on this, and I did start two other container tray type things with the grow lights on them for my bigger ferns, and I'm going to go into a little bit of detail of that towards the end. The eyelash fern is still in my garden. This one grows very, very slow. It is a very dwarf variety of fern. It grows slow. It doesn't get too big. It will probably always be in there. It's very neat texture. The kangaroo fern is probably one of the more funkier ones. This is the one that I put in the back to grow up the cocoa liner. The thing that's interesting about it is the roots on it. If you look down toward the bottom of this photograph, those little fuzzy things are actually roots that the actual fern leaf will grow off of. Here's some more detail about that. This is one of those that I haven't had the guts to use put it into a terracotta pot. So this one is actually still in a plastic container. But I would love for those things to grow up the cocoa liner. The moss fern is one of my favorites, and they can climb to a certain degree. And I've had this in my garden for probably since April, and it has growing. The neat thing about it, though, is that once it goes over the edge of the pot, it sends down roots, and those roots will actually go down into the gravel and make sort of like a hidden garden underneath where you have these roots coming down. It's almost like a banyan tree, basically, but it's a fern. It's really neat. Then I have the ruffle, or the fluffy ruffle fern. This one is probably one of my favorite. It looks like a big wave. It's a very, very interesting fern. It's part of the I think it's part of the Boston fern type of family, because the tips of it continually grow. It makes a great texture. I still have this one in the fern garden. It has gotten too big, but I like the way that it just comes in, and I'll point that out to you later on in the seminar. And so another thing I decided to put in the garden was some Spanish moss. Spanish moss, down where my parents live, they used to have it right along the edge of the river down in North Carolina, and I've always been intrigued by it. Most days I basically spray some moisture on it, and I also literally, there is a spray, a fertilizer spray that you spray on it. I do that about twice a week, and I've actually got that thing to grow. I haven't got to the extent yet of putting in a branch at the top of the garden to have the moss. That's one of my goals I'm going to do probably in the next couple of months, to see if the moss can grow on the trees and come down. So, but it's a perfect place for moss to grow. And here's the moss that's growing in there now. Another thing that I did a couple of months ago is I did moss. I love moss. I've had customers that have taken their lawn and shade and turning them into moss, and I've always been very intrigued by it. So I basically went ahead and got some pond stone, and what I was going to do was take these stones, these smooth stones, get moss to grow on them, and then plant them in the garden. So I read up that you can make a moss shake, and how you do that is you collect some moss, you take some buttermilk, and you put it into a blender. And then afterwards, you take the mixture and you paint it onto the stones. You take those stones, you put them into an area that's extremely humid. And what happens is the buttermilk feeds the moss, and the moss will cling to these cling to these stones. And so I could place all these green moss stones throughout the garden. It would bring some height in there. You could have some interesting more vistas, that sort of thing. That's what kept going. So I went ahead and did that. So I put them into a large saucer. I topped it off. I added some, spring water. Moss does not like to have any kind of, chemicals or anything like that. And then I waited. So this is how it started out. And that is in a closed area. It got plenty of light. It got plenty of humidity. And then all of a sudden, the whole experiment went south, which kind of freaked me out. So I started getting all this fungus and stuff on there. So I was very, very disappointed with this. I did this for like at least a month, and it did not turn out well. So I got rid of those. And then I was like, well, how else can I, get moss to grow in these areas? So I went out and got a few moss out of the woods, and just placed them onto the pea gravel, and they started to spread. And my next venture in one of those big type of trays that I have, the bigger ferns, is to get moss to grow all over the actual bottom of it.
All right, Louis, you're back, but you're muted. Look for the microphone button on your Zoom menu. It should be at the bottom left.
Okay,
there you go. All right, you're back.
Oh, sorry about that.
No problem. You just froze for a little bit, but we're good.
Okay, I don't know how I did that. So, but anyway, so I don't know how far back, but I wanted moss to grow in the garden, so I started putting moss into the actual pea gravel, and it did start to grow. So I am going to take some of those stones, put them in the larger gardens that I have now that have the bigger ferns that outgrew the fern garden. And hopefully I'll get some stones and have all that like a big carpet of moss. So basically what I did was I put little pieces of moss in like this, and then I waited, and about a month later, I got moss to start spreading into the gravel and actually send out a few spores that hopefully will start to, continue to grow in the garden. So I was pretty happy about that. Another thing I decided to do was I have some very small leaf vines. So I took some of those, snipped them off of my plants, and actually put them in the gravel so they could root in there and to see if they would travel. Because I wanted like a bonding type thing in the garden, and some broadleaves that would complement the leaves of the ferns. And basically they took off like you wouldn't believe. They were almost like invasive. So they started out like this, and this is the creeping Charlie, by the way. And then all of a sudden they took off and went everywhere, which I was pretty excited about. Now I got to trim them back to keep them down a little bit. But they make the whole thing very, very lush looking. So it's very exciting to me. That's the effect that I wanted. The other thing I did like halfway through was on the back, which I mentioned before, I put some cocoa liner in so that plants could grow up towards the back of the garden. So what I started to do is, I got some pegboards, and the pegboard have holes in it. So there was a lot of air flowing through there. The other thing is, since I had a solid wall in the back, it's going to increase the amount of moisture in the garden. So the first thing I did was, gave you a picture of how it looked before. The back of it is just a wall now. There's nothing on it. And then I took the pegboard and glued the cocoa liner on there. And then I screwed it into the back of the shelving unit. And the end result was this. So this is a perfect opportunity for me to start getting vines and that, that kangaroo fern and all that to grow up there. So hopefully, it worked out pretty well. I did get some of the pala vines to grow up there, and I just started doing the this is a creeping fig. It actually is very, very happy starting to grow up the cocoa liner. I did try the big creeping Charlie. It was too big. It didn't do it. And then I also tried the moss fern. Having that up against there, and it did it to a certain degree. But I do have a lot of patience, but I didn't have that much patience, so I decided to back off on that and just have 2 ferns. And then later on, I'm going to try to get a rabbitfoot fern with its hairy roots to start growing up there. But that's one of my goals that will talk to you about towards the end of the seminar. So there they are. On the right side is the pala, and that is actually done pretty well. There's your golden Boston fern, and see how small that is now. Back in the day when I did the cocoa liner, it was really small. It just really got out of hand. And then over to the left was the creeping Charlie. I tried to get that to work, but it just wouldn't adhere to the cocoa liner. And then in the middle and the back is that kangaroo fern. And again, I'm double thinking about that one because it's growing so slow. It would take forever for it to grow up there. So this is how it looks with some of that stuff in there. And do you see how lush it's starting to get? So another thing is carnivorous plants. So when you have ferns, you also have a lot of carnivorous plants that literally is a perfect type of conditions that literally the ferns have. So I decided to start doing that. And the way I did it was I got a bunch of carnivorous plants. Instead of keeping them on the gravel, I actually sunk them into the gravel so that they get constant moisture. They're a bog plant, meaning they can take constant moisture. Most plants need air on their roots. A lot of the carnivorous plants do not. There is a special soil that allows for a little bit of air in there somehow. I think it's part peat moss, and also part sand. And you can literally get those into pots and then sink them in there so they're constantly getting water from the bottom. The reason why I like the carnivorous plants is that they just look so unique compared to some of the other. Some of these ferns do have some cool features, like, the eyelash fern has great features on it. The tricolor with the red color has good features on it. A lot of the moss ferns are really neat. I have a red moss fern, but the structures of them are very similar. So when I did start putting in the carnivorous ferns, it brought a whole uniqueness into the garden, which is really nice. I never tried carnivorous plants before, and some of them have been a little bit of a challenge. So the first one is a pitcher plant, and here you can see the carnivorous plants in there. There is a pitcher plant down there, and to the small on the bottom left is also a Venus flytrap. And then to the right in the middle, the limey green, that is the butterwort. That is another carnivorous one. That's one I mentioned to you before. Awesome plant. So the pitcher plant is one that I have in the garden. This is the close-up of it. It literally has a leaf, and then at the tip of the leaf, it gives you a picture that comes down, and that fills up with a little bit of moisture. The insects crawl in there and they get eaten up. And you notice that there is some ferns, some moss starting to grow in there. I've gotten 2 or 3 new pitchers on there, which is exciting. So, as I said, this thing is growing. So I'm very excited about it. It's a very unique plant. And I decided to put this one in front of the garden so that you can go up and you can look at it. I wouldn't put this in the back. And then to the right side of that, with that real big pitcher, underneath that is the moss that I started. And then you can see some of the creeping Charlies over there as well. So it's a very, very cool plant. And then the butterwort, which my friend Jackie gave to me, and now lives out in San Diego. Anytime I look at that plant, I always think about her. It's tripled in size, and it's a limey green type of plant that, as I mentioned to you before, the insects land on it and they actually get absorbed by the leaf. The neat thing about it is that the actual plant itself, which is this one right here, you see that stem at the very top, it budded. So I got a bud on there, and then eventually it flowered for me. So I was pretty excited. When something flowers like that, you know that it's a really happy plant. So I thought Jackie would appreciate this part of it. Another one is the Venus flytrap. Venus flytraps are a native plant to the United States. They live down in North and South Carolina along the bogs where there's a lot of pine trees. It is considered an endangered species. So one thing good about humans at this point is that because humans took it over and propagated a lot, that in captivity, if you will, this thing is all over the world now. It's sort of like the Venus or the African violets. African violets in the wild are basically almost extinct because of the lack of habitat. But because they were brought under the wing of human beings, basically that's probably one of the most, if not the most popular houseplant in the world. So, but the Venus flytrap is really awesome. There's little clams, if you will, the little mouths. Actually, an insect lands in one of those and it closes up and it gets absorbed. You don't want to play with this thing to the extent of making these things open and close. It takes a lot of energy for one of these things to do that. It likes to be very, very moist. Again, I sunk this thing into the gravel, so it's constantly getting wet. And it's a very, very moist area. So it's perfect for one of these. And then lo and behold, what happened was, see that stem in front there? It flowered too. I was really excited about that. So 2 of my carnivorous plants did flower, which was just great. So then you have another pitcher plant. and it's this one right here. This is the one that the pitchers actually come out of the ground, and they basically grow up, get some moisture inside the tube, and then the insects go down there. Unfortunately, this was the casualty of mine. There's only been 2 casualties, and this is one of them. What I did was I transplanted this into a terracotta pot, and there was some kind of material around the roots of it. And I talked to my boss, Shirley, and she said, you know, I should not have removed that. And that was probably the reason why it died. So I actually got another one. I'm going to try it again. I have it in a special area, and we'll see if it starts to grow or not. But it was really unfortunate. It's a really neat plant. And there is some varieties of the pitcher plant that grow down in the south in the bog areas that are native to the area. We actually have some in this area. You go down to Meadowlark Park, they have a couple of native pitcher plants down there. And then we have the sundew, which is the newest one to my collection. This plant is awesome. The arms of it are literally have these hairs on it that have these little tiny sticky things. And what happens is the actual insects lands on the sticky thing, and the tip of the branch starts to roll around the insect and then eats it up, which I just thought was awesome. This one is actually doing very well. This thing can get actually 5 to 6 inches high. So I can't wait to see it in its true colors once it starts to thrive. And there's a close-up of it right there. So then I had a new arrival in my garden, which I was thrilled about. I got this very rare maidenhair fern, and it actually grew. It was kind of a limey green, and the actual leaves on it are very, very small. Shirley actually put one aside for me right away because she knows I love ferns. So, and I got it to grow. It's actually thriving in my garden right now. This is the way it looks. This is a very good close-up of the maidenhair. And then this is what it looks like. I also got a dragon fern that actually started in the same pot, but this thing is thriving in the garden. So one of the things I did now is I did this portfolio of how this garden has taken shape over time. So what we're going to do is look at the different periods of time. So when I started the garden, it was back on March the 26th. And this is what it looked like, you know, as you guys remember. There were only, you know, 6 things in there. One of them was the Scottish moss. You had the tricolor fern, and then you had, you know, the 3 different varieties of the maidenhair fern. So, and then on April the 23rd, it started to increase in size. So this is what it looks like now. It has the original maidenhair ferns in there. It had the original moss and the tricolor fern, but we also added the mahogany fern, the hearts fern. I put in the way in the back. I put in the moss fern, and then I had some baby tears in there that I thought would, you know, start to go into the gravel and start to take over. And then I got the dragon fern in the background there to start to take here, and some other stuff. And then on May the 20th, it really started to take off. I added a lot more stuff to it. The stuff that was there was starting to get big. Nothing had to be removed yet, but the golden one over there in the background, that is the yellow fern, that was taken out. The one next to it to the left is the mahogany fern. That one actually had to be taken out. It got too big. So unfortunately, well, fortunately, but unfortunately, these things actually are growing very, very well. And then on August the 9th, I had started to grow. I got my carnivorous plants in, so they started. I also have the Spanish moss on some dowel rods at the top. I believe that the yellow Boston fern had to be removed, and some of these other ferns had to be removed. The baby's breath in the back there the little yellow one is starting to really adhere. In the bottom ground, I have the now deceased pitcher plant. The Venus flytrap is extremely happy, and the butterwort is really starting to take off as well with that new flower bud on, if you look very closely. So, and then on September the 28th, I did a 3-part series on this. I did 3 different photographs of the garden. This is the left side of the garden. It's really gotten big. Some of the stuff had to be removed. This is the middle of the garden. You can see that the actual pitcher plant is starting to slow down a bit, and it's starting to die. I did everything in my power to try to save that thing, but it just didn't work. I got a new fern in there, which is called the zebra fern. It's a very unique one. It very quickly got bigger, so I had to take that one out almost right away. Some of these ferns grow really slow, and some of them grow pretty quickly. Then over here, you can see the purple on the butterwort. In the back is the remnants of the maidenhair, and you can see the brown back in there. The fern over there to the left has been taken out. That's the fluffy ruffle. I had to take that one out. The one to the right is still in there. That one has gotten really big, but I just love it in that corner and the way that the branching comes out over the rest of the garden, which I kind of like. Then on September the 29th, the garden looked like this. I think this is the picture that I used for the advertisement. Oh, and on here, you can see in the background that the pala is starting to grow up onto the coca liner, which is a really big deal. And if you look at the foreground, you can see that all the small leafed vines are starting to wander around on top of the pea gravel. And if you look, it's right smack in the middle on the bottom to that pitcher plant right there. To the right of that, you can see the moss is starting to start as well. Then on November, what I decided to do is to do some artsy stuff. One thing I really love about photography is going into the very nooks and crannies of this garden. This is a picture of the one of the Boston ferns. It's a twisty one. I forget the name of it. And then the back of this photograph is the red moss fern. It's a neat photograph. It's a nice contrast in there. This one right here is further back. This has the red moss fern in there. It has a lot of the vines that are starting to take over. To the right of it is the eyelash fern, and then in the back in the left is the small looking maidenhair fern that I got. Way in the back there is a type of pothos that basically I wanted to grow up. It didn't take either. I like that one, but the leaves are basically too big on it. I think you need something a little bit more finer. And then this is a simple one with the eyelash fern with the dragon fern in the background. And I constantly keep these things very moist so that they thrive. They really do like a very moist type of condition. This is one that I thought was unique because it has the Spanish moss in there. And it has all the different types of ferns in there. And this one is one of the ones that I took right after it got wet. So, I mean, within the garden, you have these real small, intimate pieces of it. And if you really stare at it, you can really see some really incredible thing about what nature's all about. So this is what it looks like from a distance of my apartment. I do have a philodendron on the left side that is on a hook that actually kind of borderlines or bookends the garden. And then on the right, I put that creeping Charlie up there as well so that it could literally drape down onto its side. So one of the things about a garden is how it just transforms over time. So one of my goals for the future of the fern garden is to get a branch in there over top so that I can start hanging the moss, so that the moss is just not on the side of the garden, but the moss is inside, so that it literally will start dangling down to make it look even better. I do want to take a rabbit's foot fern. I'm going to show you a rabbit's foot fern at the very end. It has hairy roots on it that actually thrive and go up the cocoa liner. And then you get these big ferns coming off of it. I thought that would be something, and I actually just purchased one yesterday that I'm going to start to do that with. Another thing is the pea gravel. I'm going to continue to get that pea gravel to get all that moss growing on it. It is a very, very time-consuming thing, but I think it is worth it. I did get another tray that it's a 36 by 18 tray, just like the size of my garden, that, the fern garden. And I put all the bigger ferns on it. And underneath there, I want to put in the stone, the smooth stone, get moss to grow on that. The moss can also grow on the terracotta, and it can also grow on the pea gravel. So underneath all these big ferns, all I want is to have just this big carpet of moss growing everywhere. And then, Shirley always gets some really cool ferns in, and realizing I don't have a lot as compared to what she can get in. So it's always nice as a hobby to bring new ferns in and see, if I can get them to grow and how I can fit them into the different fern gardens that I have right now. I did literally have problems with the pitcher plant, as I told you about. And the other one is the hearts plant, or hearts fern. The hearts fern actually grows on trees. And when things grow on trees, you kind of realize they need that high moisture content, but they do not need to be very moist with their roots. So I think I overwatered my hearts fern. I still have one leaf on it, but I'm going to try that one again and see if I can make that one thrive. It's a really neat plant. Another thing I want to do, as I mentioned, I got the 2 trays of the larger ferns, and I just described to you what is written here, is that I do want to do a carpet of moss growing all over it, and then having the ferns over top of it. I think that would be really neat. So I'm always looking for new ferns for my collection. And then again, having them in pots, I can rearrange them. So, on a winter's day, I can go and make a whole new design out of it. Some plants are very tricky when they start to adhere to the cocoa liner. I noticed that I was not able to remove the plant, water it, and then move it back. So there's a steady type of thing you have to really be concerned about when watering some of those things that are actually adhered to the cocoa liner. But I can always get a new design going and kind of reform this garden over periods of time. So, as I said, the one thing about a garden is that it's never done. So I can continue to do this over and over and over again and continue to expand it. So it makes me really happy. It brings me a lot of joy in my life. And this is a picture of it, what it's like. Probably I took this within the last week or 2 weeks. This is what it looks like. So one thing that I wanted to show you, let me see here. One thing I wanted to show you is, I don't know what I did. Sally, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Did you switch the
but
we can still see you. Are you trying to bring your screen up?
Oh, okay. So if you can see me, one thing I wanted to show you is this plant here. This is the rabbit fern. And if you can see the bottom of it, you see all those hairy type roots. Can you imagine those going up the cocoa liner? So that's the one thing I wanted to show you. But that's the end of my seminar. If you have any questions or anything for me.
Louis, we have a lot of questions that have come in, so I'll get started on those. And just a reminder to everybody, if you have more questions, please feel free to type those in. If we need to, we can go longer than the 1 o'clock time period. Just know that you can follow up tomorrow to get the recording. We will be sending the recording out to you all by email with your coupon and uploading the full recording to the YouTube channel if you end up leaving before we're done with questions. First, Louis, I think I'm going to take this and make a centerpiece for my dining room table. So I have really good light, so I can actually make that work in my dining room. So we'll start with our first question. I like to use Baker ferns in my floral arrangements. Are you familiar with the Baker fern?
Okay, so I'm sorry, I find it hard to hear you there, Sally.
Are you familiar with Baker's ferns?
Yes.
Okay. So the question is, okay, so she uses them. Can they be grown outdoors? Good question.
I do not believe so.
Okay. So keep it inside in your fern garden. Next question. Okay. Louis, you may have the answer to this, and I also have some good follow-up information, depending on, but that I can share anyways. Years ago, I bought a deerfoot fern. I'm sorry, I need my glasses. Deerfoot fern from Merrifield. I did beautifully for years in an east window, but then went downhill. I have not been able to find another one like it, although I have seen some deerfoot ferns which were not the same. Every spring it would appear. It got to about 3 feet across. Do you have any idea what the scientific name for this fern would be? Where, and I can address this part if you don't know, where I could find it.
So what I can do is, I'm here at Merrifield. I'm here 6 days a week. If you bring in a photograph of that fern, I would be able to identify it. I can't really identify it from a description of it. I'm more visual. So if you basically would come in with a photograph, I'll be able to tell you what fern it is, and then I can check with Shirley, our greenhouse manager, and see if we can get some of those in for you.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to add to that is, in general, for any plant, ferns or any other plant, if we don't carry it and we're able to get it in for you, we will do our best to do that. And Shirley is really good about, Shirley runs the greenhouse at our Fair Oaks store. Our greenhouse managers at our other stores will do the same thing for you. You can contact them, and if they can get a plant in for you, if we don't carry it, they will do that. We can't guarantee that it's possible, but whenever it is, we're happy to do that. So we can help you ID that plant, hopefully. Okay, next question. This is about the maidenhair ferns. Okay, I would like to know which are perennials and what you could try to grow outdoors versus, okay, so I know you mentioned a few types of maidenhair ferns, and you had an easier time growing one that is you find in the Virginia area. So which ones can you break down? Which ones could be grown outdoors or indoors, and which ones you found the easiest to grow?
Okay, so the same one. So the one that actually is native to this area is one that comes up with a branch, and then on that branch comes rounded fern things that come out. That's the best way I can describe it. And I can actually show you that again.
Yeah, do you know the specific, are they all just maidenhair fern, or is there like I'm assuming there's some scientific breakdown we could probably pull? I could try and send that out in notes tomorrow, because we may have to find the scientific for them.
The point is that one that I mentioned, we do have it here in our perennial area. And that one is actually hard to grow outdoors. There's a lady that I know who used to be a professor over at George Mason. I call her the Fern Lady. Years ago, she does a lot of seminars on ferns, and I used to go and listen to her. And she said that she found a maidenhair fern triangle in a yard where she had just bought her house. And these 3 maidenhair ferns were the native ones from outdoors. But what she found was a limestone in the middle of the triangle. And that told her that maidenhair ferns like to be more neutral or like to be more alkaline. Ferns in general like to be acidic. That's most ferns are more acidic. They like acidy type of soil. But maidenhair ferns, that's one of the drawbacks to them, is they like to be a little on the limey side. They like to be a little more alkaline. Um, the maidenhair fern for outdoors, literally, I saw some up in the an old rag, which amazing me. It was growing outdoors. So yes, we do have the maidenhair fern in our perennial house right now that you can grow outside. And that is by far the easiest one to grow, in my opinion.
Okay. And I'll send out in a plant list tomorrow any notes about this. My notes. So I would always recommend following up with the store or with Louie to get more detailed information, but I can send out any notes that I have for you all. All right. Yeah. I always think of, because we have a native maidenhair fern in Florida that my grandmother just had these giant, like 3 to 4 foot ones that just grew in her backyard. So I always think of her. All right. Next question. Will a Venus flytrap grow in a terrarium? Could you take this concept of the fern garden and do a miniature one inside a terrarium?
Yes, you definitely can. I think that Savannah is going to be doing a terrarium seminar here this week. So
That's a private workshop. She will be for a garden club. Yes. But if anyone's interested in that, not in that specific one, email me. We can always do another class for that.
Yes. The thing about ferns though is that some of them grow very quickly. So if you have a very limited space, I would definitely get ones like the eyelash fern. You could go with the heart fern. You could go with the fern moss. All those are very miniature, smaller type ferns. And I would put those into the terrarium more so than some of the larger ones. One that I did a thing about terrariums years ago, and I found that there was one guy who put a fern into a big, like 3-gallon glass container, and he closed it up, and it's been closed for like 20 some years. I do have some moss growing in my apartment in a terrarium that I have closed for like 3 years. So even though they might outgrow the area, they don't look as pretty, but you can definitely put ferns into a terrarium. You just have to make sure about the size of them.
Okay, and sorry if you guys can hear background noise. Someone in a condo around me is now drilling, and it sounds like it's in my house. All right, next question. Can you trim any ferns to keep them small? Is that possible, or like you said, do you need to go with just smaller ferns in general?
That's an excellent question. So when they get a root system on them, they can grow relatively quickly. I was talking to a colleague of mine, and she had a maidenhair fern for like 2 years. And she said she missed it. She said she had it unravel. She said sometimes she would literally cut the thing to the ground because it got dried out or something. And then the actual plant fern came back. So I thought that was amazing to me. So yes, you can cut down ferns and have them come back for you. I would be a little bit more hesitant than not to try to see if that would happen. If you have one of those out there that you really like, but it's getting too big, what you can do is take out most of the fronds, see if new ones replace it before actually chopping the whole thing to the ground. But again, when you think about the root system, when those fronds come out, they might not be dwarf anymore because they're feeding off of a very established root system, and those fronds might just get just as big.
Okay, that's good information. I did want to ask you really quick, only from I've experienced this personally. When you're dealing with your carnivorous plants, do you water those with distilled water?
I don't. I use spring water on those.
Oh, okay.
I don't use any water out of the spigot.
Just don't use water from the tap.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean all my house plants don't get tap water.
Okay.
I don't usually drink tap water. Why should my plants do that?
Yeah,
So
I was just
I
thinking of
know
that because I
some of
actually
them.
killed a Venus flytrap with tap water. And so I was wondering if you used some kind of special water as well. I have a sundew and a pitcher plant now that use distilled. So uh okay, next question. I have a sunroom that's not heated and gets pretty chilly in the winter. Can I grow a fern garden like yours if I keep the light and moisture appropriate?
Okay, I'm sorry. Say that again.
I'm sorry if you can hear drilling, everybody. I have a sunroom that's not heated and gets pretty chilly in the winter. Can I grow a fern garden like yours if I keep the light and moisture appropriate? So is
So,
temperature an issue?
so the good news is there are some ferns that actually are hardy to this area that are evergreen. One of them is the Christmas fern, the one that I just saw that had the hairy fronds coming out. Another one is the autumn fern. Another one is the maidenhair fern. And another one is, well, maidenhair ferns might not be an evergreen. And another one is the tassel fern. So there are ferns that are in our area that are evergreen that can grow outside all year round. Um, if your outdoor area gets frozen, then most of the ferns that I talked to you about that are indoor literally would not work. Now you have to be very careful as to how low that temperature goes. So if you do have the moisture and you do have the light, the next thing to consider is the temperature. Some ferns need it down, they can take it down to 55 degrees. And then those are the real tropical ones. Then there are ones that actually can grow, but they can't take anything that's frozen or close to it. Those are the 2 points. So if you do research on the different fern types, you'll find out which ferns can actually take it down to freezing, and they can survive a little bit above freezing. Some of those ferns that I showed you probably will be able to take that, but I just don't know which ones. As I said, I have an apartment, so, but you can do research on the individual names and find out what the zone is.
Okay. All right, next question. Are you familiar with a bear fern?
Say it again.
A bear fern, like the animal, a bear.
I am not familiar with the bear fern.
Okay. Send me an email if you want some information. We'll try and find out what that is, like the scientific name, and we can try and help you. This person's asking for tips caring for the bear fern. They were just given one. Let's see. Okay. What percentage humidity is best for the fern garden?
So for me, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a scientist, but what I do know is that if you take and put in a gravel area and you have water that comes up, you don't want them to sit in the water, you want to sit on top of the gravel, and then put a lot of ferns in around each other so that they add humidity. And then literally every day I mist my ferns so that they're almost dripping with water. I don't know what percentage that is, but I do know that that works for me.
Okay. Yeah, gotta try different stuff, I suppose. And I know if you have a more humid environment, that probably helps. But okay, next question. What is the easiest fern to grow, in your opinion? So if you're a beginner fern gardener, what would you start with?
Probably the easiest fern for me was the Boston fern. There's all sorts of different varieties of Boston ferns, but they tend to grow relatively easily. They're the ones that you put outside during the summertime, on porches and stuff. They get quite large. There's 2 of them. There's one here and there's one here. And remember, the tips of them will continue to grow. There was a friend of mine, used to be my roommate. She had a fern outdoors through the summertime, a Boston fern. She set it in her laundry room with a light, and literally she would wet it down about once every 3 days, and the thing survived all the way through the winter time. So I think that, in my opinion, is probably one of the more easier ones. Another one I like that's pretty easy is the bird's nest fern. That one can take a little bit less care than some of the other ones. That one actually has a core, and the fronds come out and they look like leaves. That's another pretty easy one to grow.
Okay, yeah, I actually had a really easy time with a bird's nest fern, and it got so big. I had to anyways, yeah, I had to like repot it because it got so big, and I was not great at caring for that plant. Um, okay, are you familiar with button fern?
I am.
Okay, do you have any tips for caring for that plant?
Yeah, so the button fern is one of those that I got really, really small, and that thing outdid itself. So I took it out of the fern garden. It's one of those that it's not hard, but it's not easy. It needs constant care. Mine has gotten so root bound, I have to water it like every other day right now. That plant does tell me when it needs to be watered, because it will look a little more droopy, and then you water it and it will stand back up again, and then you'll get a couple of new fronds on it. I have that one in the big fern garden. I have it elevated on a terracotta pot, so it sits up a little higher than some of the other ferns. It is a relatively easy fern to grow when it goes to ferns. I mean, ferns in general are not that easy, but this one is relatively easy. It also has some hair on it, well, which I think is kind of cool. So it has a little red tint to it too.
I just had you on mute. Okay, next question. This is back to the water for the carnivorous plants. And I know I've read that when you're like, because these plants grow in environments where they're not like the water, it's like water from swamps, so they're not getting their nutrients from the water, they're getting it from like the insects, which is why the tap water can kill them. So here's the question: what about tap water that runs through a Brita filter? Would that work? Have you used that, or are you buying like spring? I have no idea if it would or not, because I don't know what's removed by a Brita filter.
Okay, so this is a funny story. So
Okay.
I had my Merrifield shirt on, and I was over at Trader Joe's, and I had like 8 bottles of water. And I came up and I had my other groceries as well, and I'm checking out. And the guy looks at me and goes, "Oh, you work at Merrifield?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, well, that's kind of cool." And he goes, "You like your job?" I'm like, "Yeah, I really like I'm a green thumber." And he's like, "Oh, cool." And then he looks down at the water, and he looks back at me and he goes, "Are you buying water for your plants?" And I look over and I said, "That is a secret. I don't even tell my closest friends this." So I always buy bottled water for my plants. I think it's really important. And I also give them just a very, very small amount of fertilizer. A lot of ferns, they say you don't need to fertilize them. I like the idea of giving them just a small amount to make sure that they have as much nutrients as they need. But I mean, I don't have any experience with using filter water out of the tap. I know that you can find out from a filter company if all the chlorine and all the chemicals come out. I know I do drink filtered water, but I don't know. I just don't know, how much chemicals are removed and how much aren't.
Yeah, we just got another question related to that. So then the next question is, would rainwater be good, or would that work? We have rain barrels. I
There's
I've heard yes, but I've never tried it.
Yeah, I mean, so rainwater is what they are in nature. The
Yeah.
only dynamic you got to think about is acid rain. Um, but overall, I believe that rainwater would be fine. It's really
Yeah.
weird. I told you I work out in trees and shrubs, and we have a sprinkler system that wets them down every single night, because we can't possibly water all these plants by hand. When it rains, the rain actually makes the plant look so much better. You can tell rainwater versus spigot water, and how the plants just love that rainwater. They look so much better right after it rains.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, Yeah, I've thought about trying rainwater, but since I live in a condo, my balcony's covered up, and it's just hard to collect that, even though anyways, yeah, I stick with the distilled. But okay, this is our last question. Or do you have any care tips for the stag fern, which I believe kind of looks like a bird's nest fern? Just oh no, we have more. Um, any care tips for the stag fern?
Yeah, so I think I have a fern that is a stag fern. Um, they are very broad-leaved, if this is the one I'm thinking about. And they remind me a little bit of the ferns that grow on trees. And for the life of me right now, I can't remember what they are. They have a very limited root system, and they're one of those that can actually take a little bit more on the drier side. You can literally go online. I can probably find out the answer to you about a stag fern, but I think it's probably in the same category as some of the other ferns that grow on trees. So I'm pretty sure of that. So they can take a lot of humidity, but their root system can dry out to a certain degree because they grow on trees. You know,
Okay. I think I know the answer to this, but I may be unaware of some carnivorous plants. Can they eat like bees, butterflies, and caterpillars? And all the ones I know of are like this big. So no, I think they get like gnats. But do you know of any that are big enough to capture any of those things?
Okay, so there is some kind of pitcher plants that are very, very large. I don't know about butterflies. I don't know about some of the larger things. I know for myself, and that's the only thing I can speak of, is I have a few of those little tiny flies. They're
Like
called,
fungus gnats, right?
yeah. And
Yeah, that's what I use mine to catch.
the neat thing about it is when I got my collection of the carnivorous plant, those flying type little tiny insects, there wasn't very many of them to start with. And now I rarely see them. But when I look on my butterwort, I can see remnants of the little flies. So, if you do have a problem with any kind of, little tiny fruit flies or whatever, especially if you have a lot of plants, you can get rid of those by putting in, a couple of carnivorous plants. I know that with my Venus flytrap, it can take, maybe a small fly or something like that, but pretty much you don't really want to feed them that much because you think in nature that it's very rare for them to actually catch a bug. You don't want to overfeed them. So I'm very cautious about that. And I see some of the Venus flytrap catchers closed, and I assume that some fly or some small thing did get in there. So
Okay. Yeah, I know I use mine if you have a like infestation of fungus gnats, which has unfortunately happened to me, but I needed more than my carnivorous plants to deal with that. But on a day-to-day basis, it's enough to get any flies that get in, little ones. Okay, this is our last question, and I'll tell you, Louis, I don't know that we can really answer this because it's about more technical information about rain barrels. So just to be clear, we don't actually like sell rain barrels at the store. We're all very supportive of them. And we get questions about them from time to time, but I don't think we could speak to the specifics of this just because, and we don't do roofing either. But the question is, if you took water from a rain barrel, would it contain toxins from the shingles on the roof? And I'd have to say, I guess it depends on where the water's coming from, what the roof is like, and all that stuff. We can't really answer that question, but
well, so I have a bunch of my friends that have rain barrels.
Yeah,
they are awesome for watering plants outdoors.
Yeah.
The thing you have to be concerned about is different types of funguses and different types of stuff that in sitting water that automatically take effect. So for me, I would outdoor watering is fine. Indoor watering, I would be extremely cautious.
Wouldn't bring it indoors. Okay, that's some good information there. Yeah, and just so everybody knows, we don't sell rain barrels or do any of that, but a lot of us are very in favor of rain barrels, and we have friends who use them if we don't have a house big enough for rain barrels ourselves, which is me. All right. Well, Louis, thank you so much. That is the
Oh,
last
you're
of.
welcome. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. This is
Oh,
really,
thank you. We have some people wishing us happy holidays and saying thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I will send out the coupon tomorrow, the recording, and I will send out some notes from of the plants that Louis discussed, just so that you all can have the spellings of those plants. Please, 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 please feel free to email me if you have any questions. Call or come visit Louis. Louis, you're primarily now in the greenhouse and doing fresh greens
so
once the
right
greens
now
arrive.
I'm in a transitional period. I'm actually doing, a couple seminars, and then I am getting ready to do some greens. I do greens all the way through the holidays. But just keep in mind that I'm here every single day except for Saturday. Anybody, can come in here and we can go into the greenhouse. I can talk to you about starting up a garden like this. I can talk to you about the different ferns that we have on hand and my personal experiences with them. That one-in-one type of situation in my book always works really well. And when you come to in, I can physically show you the different ferns that we have and, and different qualities about them. So,
All right. Well, thank you so much, Louis. And I just want to issue a quick reminder to everybody before we close that our Christmas shop does officially open this Thursday. We'll be having a big holiday night out celebration at all 3 of our stores. So I'm going to get those coupons out to you guys before that. I think we'll have a holiday night out coupon as well for you at
yeah,
the store.
that should be a lot
But
of
I
fun.
would encourage you guys to stop by, have some drinks, and check out some of our Christmas stuff before Thanksgiving arrives. And Louis, thank you so much. Thank you,
Oh, you're
everybody.
welcome. It was my pleasure.
Oh yeah, this was a fun one. I can't wait to go make my own little fern garden. So, all
There
right.
you
Well,
go.
everybody have a good afternoon. I'll talk to you all later. Bye.